So now have to Mr. Kapnias.
Thanks for having us.
Good. So if you would please state your name and your interest. Names.
John Kapnias, Director at Southern Cross Chauffeur Drive.
And George Kapnias, Director at Southern Cross Chauffeur Drive.
Thank you. So please speak.
Thank you for having us. Our submission to, or our letter to, most recent letter to the inquiry was along the lines of our last points made at the briefing, and simply put, our points are that the current price of the hire car licence, a proposed reduction in that licence price would not make a significant change to people's operating costs. What makes a bigger difference is the stability of that price, and for potential entrants to know what may happen to that licence price over a period of time, over a 5 or 10 year period, which is the sort of likely time frame that new entrants are looking at, which represents the life of 1 or 2 vehicles, so 5 or 10 years. And it's really that it's the sense of security or knowing what's going to happen to that licence that makes a bigger impact on attracting new entrants. And whilst we would encourage new entrants because our business is built on creating new entrants, it's new entrants who are reluctant to make a commitment, which is around the licence price and around a car and around setting up their business in whatever way they see fit, that determines what their actions are. And without new entrants, we're not going to get a growing market of supply. Now, in terms of transitionary processes, I guess the 2 main aims are firstly to encourage new entrants and secondly not to disadvantage existing operators. And I'm sure you've had a number of suggestions around that, whether they be a cash compensation to existing operators if there's a devaluation of licences, or if there's an additional issue of licences to existing operators if there's a devaluation of licences. But whatever the inquiry's recommendations may be, that I think it's important not only that there's something structured to encourage new entrants, but also to not so much compensate, but certainly protect the fact that the few thousand existing participants have generally paid for their licence, and have seen a capital devaluation over a period of time over the last review, and it's certainly discouraging to have that happen again.
Okay. Did you have any queries?
No, so what you're saying is, where it was flagged in the report that there should be a review of the hire car price after a period of time, that's creating some uncertainty for you, which is worse of a problem.
It's a bigger problem
than actually.
It's a bigger problem than having a big licence price, because people just don't know.
Yeah.
And we go and we provide some data to the Commission, which perhaps has been lacking, I don't know, but we provide some data that in fact shows that the interest cost, the interest expense, because most people in the hire car industry are single car operators. They're not big conglomerates, not big investment firms. So they're single car operators. They generally borrow their money from the bank against their home to buy an MH licence. And the proposal to introduce licences at $36,000 over and above $55,000, which is where they are at the moment, would make a $1,300 a year difference on the interest expense on funding that whole licence, $1,300. And we show you that in running a normal hire car business, that is not where the costs are. And by attacking the licence value, we are not achieving what I think is the Commission's aim, which is lowering entry costs, which is lowering operating costs, ongoing costs, and therefore you can pass on those savings to customers. So it's not making our hire car business a hell of a lot more competitive by reducing the funding cost on a licence from $3,900 a year to $2,600 a year, when a typical Southern Cross operator incurs approximately $40,000 in costs, whether it be fuel, repairs, maintenance, service fees, marketing fees, etc. The biggest cost in running a hire car business is generating the goodwill, getting your name out in the marketplace and getting a car to the booking, that lead time. And all of the infrastructure that is involved and the technology that's involved in getting that scale of business up. And by constantly having reviews which we feel undermine the stability of the industry, it actually disencourages operators such as ourselves to continue making those investments that are necessary to, aggregate the resources of operators and make ourselves more accessible to customers and more efficient and more cost effective.
Sure. One thing that's been suggested by some people to the inquiry is instead of setting a price for a hire car licence, we should do what we've suggested for taxis, and that is have a lease price. Do you have a view on that at all?
Well, I don't have a view on that because we haven't seen that as one of the recommendations.
No.
But the what we've suggested in our letter regarding transitionary arrangements is that we think that licences should continue to be issued without a fixed term. They should be issued on the basis that they can be transferred but not assigned, and that some structure be put around the cost or price or value of them.
If you're asking for an answer off the
I realise it's just throwing it at you cold, but something maybe you could think about and come back to us.
Well, it just comes down to what's the present value of the discounted cash flow of the lease over a period of time.
Well, if we take the New South Wales example, that's what's happened in New South Wales, I believe, over 10 years ago. But I think the New South Wales government took the view at the time that they weren't conducting reform in a vacuum, and that the existing operators were fairly and reasonably compensated for the value of their existing licence, and now you can get into the hire car industry and lease a licence at a set amount per year. And all we are saying, I suppose, in the few options that we've put to the Commission in our response, or the inquiry, I should say, to our response, is that that view be maintained, that, reform isn't happening in a vacuum. Smaller hire car operators have borrowed money in good faith to buy a government-issued licence. In our case, we paid up to $78,000 in 1998 for a licence. So we hold 4 licences. And we've seen that the value of those licences progressively devalued. Now, the inquiry is once the industry's buy-in, but we feel that the capital that we've invested over the years into the industry should be respected in any reform going forward. And if there's a proposal to lease licences to operators, well, perhaps we should the existing licences should be bought back before that's considered.
Just on another matter, in the initial submission, you discussed this question of compliance at Melbourne Airport and all of that. And also, do you have any views on this idea of a kiosk at the airport?
Firstly, the issue of compliance, it's a slight on the industry and on Melbourne in general, what happens at the airport. We have operated a business for 15 years. We've been able to operate that business for 15 years without having one driver caught for touting at Melbourne Airport. We've serviced in excess of 1 million bookings in that time. For some reason, despite the fact that we've had all these imposition of costs, landside authorities, driver authorities, the imposition of hefty parking which never existed, all of these things put in place, cameras, fines have been increased to $2,000, we still see that touting at the Melbourne Airport by rogue operators is rampant. And we, in our response to the inquiry, there's a number of things that we do support in the inquiry's proposal, and one of them is that penalties be stiffened for people caught touting, and that the new Commission has got flexible powers to ensure compliance with legislation. Anecdotally, what's been happening is those people who do get caught get taken down to taken to William Street, get a slap on their wrist, and they're back the next week doing the same thing because they can't be denied their source of income. I mean, that really devalues the goodwill that's in the industry and the hard work that legitimate operators are putting in. So we would like to see that that policing regime and the powers of the new Commission be ramped up to be able to eradicate that. With regards to the kiosk, it's an idea, and I'm sorry, but that's all it is. It's an idea. The kiosk, if you actually think of the mechanics of how it would operate, how would you set fares? Who's going to pay Melbourne Airport to manage the kiosk? Who's going to pay Melbourne Airport to man it, or which company is going to take that on? How are they going to earn a income? They're obviously going to charge a commission on operators for each booking that they generate. How are they going to guarantee supply? Because if customers get used to rolling up to the kiosk to avail themselves of a hire car, what will tend to happen is the hire cars will be there at the down times, but when peak times are on, they'll have their own clients. So managing the supply of the hire cars through that outlet is something that really needs huge consideration, and I was interested to read Melbourne Airport's response, where they have clearly, I think, made the case that in their infrastructure planning, they've planned for the provision of taxis to come through and for a kiosk to be enabled and for hire cars to have curbside access. That's a major planning exercise on their behalf. So we'd be interested to see the detail as how that would operate and how it would operate to the benefit of consumers at peak time when hire car operators aren't booked at Friday afternoons at 5 o'clock with their own booking. What would happen to the kiosk then? What would happen to the kiosk customers then? So we don't know if it's...
Yeah, I think the mechanics of a kiosk creates difficulties. If you think about the person walking out of the airport to the curb and hailing a yellow cab, that cab is obliged to take that passenger to where that passenger wants to go at the prescribed fare. Now, in private hire cars, what's the prescribed fare? You know, who's going to oblige a particular driver who has made himself available to go somewhere where he may or may not want to go? It's just the mechanics would seem to be, difficult unless there's some uniform fare, some uniform standard, as is in the taxi industry, and we're not necessarily advocating for that sort of those sort of initiatives.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your submission, and I think you've got your point over.
Thanks very much. So, thanks for having us.
Okay.